So, salt caves are a thing. There are places where there are caves which are literally made out of salt. There are some famous, beautiful ones in Poland where they mine salt, and in the process of mining salt, they started like decorating it. So, there's like this whole cathedral in salt buried in Poland, which is kind of awesome. And I want to see it one of these days, but who knows? Anyway, so they start hammering through the rock, which is kind of silly. But they get through and they don't have to blast because usually when people with this level of technology want to go drilling holes in rock, making holes in rock, what they do is they take a drill, which is a long pointed piece of metal, and they get with a hammer and they just hammer it. And they have a whole bunch of people trading off hammering and holding the rod, and it drills into the rock, and then they fill it with dynamite or gunpowder and they set it off and it explodes, and they take the fractured rock out and they repeat the process further on down. But they didn't do it that way. They just started beating on the rock, and then they found a hole behind it. And when they found the hole behind it, they were like, okay. And they started to go in, and the father felt faint, which is what can happen if there's bad air. And he's kind of lucky that he fell faint and backed out, because there have been numerous instances where people have gone into a cave, passed out from bad gases, or gone into a sewer, gone into some enclosed space, passed out, and usually 3 or 4 people die trying to rescue them before they go and do things properly. So fortunately, he didn't die. He just got sick and he backed out. Now, tossing the flaming hay into the fire, into the cave, that fixes some things. Carbon monoxide, which is 1 carbon and 1 oxygen, which is very, very toxic. If you are to heat it, it breaks down. Or heat it with oxygen, it breaks down. It actually burns. So that breaks down. Hydrogen sulfide breaks down. But the problem is that if it's just carbon dioxide, then there's not going to be any air. And what happens then is what happened when he tossed the burning hay in. Toss the burning hay into a cave of carbon dioxide, it just goes out because there's no oxygen to burn the hay. So they ended up shooting the rockets in there, which I guess kind of disturbed things a little bit. But that may not have been enough to do it. But because carbon dioxide is heavier than air, it sinks. And because it has a weight of 44 grams per cubic meter, as opposed to normal atmospheres 30-ish, it sinks, it's heavier. So it sinks down, rolls out of the cave. And so fresh air goes in, bad air comes out. And eventually they test it and they toss in the burning stuff and it burns. They're like, it's fixed. It's like, no, it just naturally fixed itself. Building a proper chimney, though, talked about building a proper chimney in there, that's the right thing to do. Because what that does is when you put a fire in the chimney, it heats up. And it heats up, and that air goes up the chimney. And that pulls the air around the fire in and feeds the fire. So that pulls all this air in, and all of that goes up and out. So the smoke goes up and out. The air around goes up and out. The carbon dioxide that we breathe out goes up and out. And fresh air comes into the cave. So you get this fresh air coming in through the door, and it ventilates the cave. And this was actually something done during the Civil War. And the Civil War is when trench warfare was really invented. So they had these tunnels, and they were digging these tunnels under fortifications. And what they would do is they would build a fire at the end, and they would have this long chimney sort of thing going all the way out and up behind the lines. So you have a couple 100 feet of chimney and have a fire right in the front. And you're like, fire in a closed space, that's how you suffocate. That makes carbon monoxide. But because they had the chimney there, and the chimney took the air straight out, so the air went straight out and boom, out the end, fresh air got pulled in. So that actually forced circulation. So they used fire to clear the air. And so putting a proper chimney air in there fixes things. So they did the herring bank, where there's a whole bunch of herrings swimming together. Now, whales that eat such fish have a way of hunting where they circle the fish and get them all bunched up together. Now, here you just have enough fish that they're all bunched up together anyway, but they had larger fish, probably things like tuna, driving them. So these fish get all bunched up together. And yes, there are places where you can just go and take a basket and just dump it into the water and toss it out onto land, just like catch fish, just like scooping them up and out. So they got a whole bunch of herring, salted them, preserved them, smoked some of them. And so that's good stuff. When I was in Portugal, I had sardines, which are a type of herring. They're about yay big. These were yay big and very different from the canned sardines that people talk about and that you find on pizzas. But herring, good food, great tasting. They caught sturgeon. Now, I'm not so sure about sturgeon and salmon making a run up a creek of this size. And usually you only see one or the other, not both on the same creek. And this is not that big of a river. And sturgeon, you have this 8-foot fish going up a river. It's like, I don't remember the river being that wide. It was only like 20 feet across, and doesn't strike me as that deep because the dad waded across it. But you have these huge fish going up, and they caught it, and he made caviar, so that's kind of cool. They had the bull. So now they have a cow and a bull, and they can get maybe more cows and bulls and, have a whole bunch of that. Oh, and the beast with the bill that they found. That's kind of cool. That is a platypus. And once again, that's only found in Australia. I talked about them. They are egg-laying mammals. When they were first brought back to Europe, everyone was like, this is fake. This can't be real. And they didn't even mention some of the weirdest parts about it. Platypuses have spurs on their rear legs. And these spurs on their rear legs have venom glands. So it is like poisonous. It could like stab things with these spurs and inject poison and kill things like that. So the platypus is just wonky. And black swans. Now, a black swan is something that was not thought to exist. For the longest time, it's like swans are all white. If you see a big water bird, it is a swan. If you see a big water bird, if it's white, it's a swan. If it's not white, it's something else. It's a goose or something else. But swans were always white, always white. But about this time, a little bit before this time, they found in Australia black swans. And everyone just thought this is something that couldn't occur because everyone knew that swans were white until they found black ones. And these swans were just black all over. And black swan has become a name of an event, usually in economics, business, finance type of thing, that everyone thinks can't happen. So, there were banks that were considered too big to fail because, they had so much money that even if all sorts of everything went bad, the banks just had enough money that they could survive. And there was this whole idea of too big to fail, or that the whole stock market wouldn't crash at once, or that, 9/11 was considered a black swan event. Corona has been a black swan event, where it's like, oh no, there will never be a global plague that kills all sorts of people, that kills millions of people. It's like, this isn't something that'll happen until it does happen. And so that's what the black swan is. It's something that is considered impossible to happen until it actually does, and then everyone's like, I didn't think it would happen. So that is, yeah, the it's something that's considered that's not going to happen, and then it does. So they found black swans, they found more monkeys, they found ginseng. Um, as I said, ginseng was imported into North America, and it has since just gone wild, and there's places where it just grows in the woods because it's a type of plant that grows well in the woods. It's a short it's a short plant, long tubers that run underground, which means that once it's kind of in a place, you can't really get rid of it because you can't pull up all of the root. And because it has these big roots and it'll just continuously grow and keep growing. And I mean, there are ads on billboards. It's like, got ginseng, and it's like people who offer to buy this stuff. Ginseng has a nice taste. Ginseng tea is quite popular. Um, how do you describe a taste? It's sort of spicy and sort of has a good nose to it, I guess. It's a good way to describe it. So that they found ginseng, and that's good, and they found rice, and it's like, okay, so now they brought barley, rye, and wheat with them, maize, and now they have rice. So they have like all of the staple grains, plus all of the unusual sort of carbohydrate sources. They have animals of every type you'd imagine. They're doing really great the with the animals hunting. They've somehow convinced a jackal to become a bird dog, and the eagle is being magnificent for hunting. So now they're talking about making birdlime to catch the orangers, and this is kind of this is a very human thing. Essentially, what it is it's a sticky substance, and the birds land on it and they get stuck. And once they get stuck, well, they're stuck, and you just collect them at your leisure. And so that's probably what they're going to be doing in the next chapter, because they went off to get the rubber to make the caoutchouc to make the bird lime. So that should be interesting. They had their day of Thanksgiving, which celebrated when they get off the wreck, which is kind of cool. Thanksgiving in America started with the Pilgrims landing at Plymouth Rock because, they sailed to North America. They were looking for a place, and they're like, okay, this is it. And they celebrated their landing with the day of Thanksgiving, which is a very biblical thing to do. In the Bible, when the Israelites had a great accomplishment, when something great happened, there was the harvest. There were a couple of harvest feasts where it's like, okay, today we are celebrating our harvest. We're giving thanks to God, and they had a party. And Passover is a Thanksgiving sort of feast. It's like, we escaped from Egypt. It's like, we're going to throw a party, and it's like roast meat, and it's bread, and it's all sorts of wonderful foods. And so, it's a Thanksgiving is a very common thing to do. It's like, okay, we've won, we've succeeded, we've had a party. And here they have their games, and all of the boys competed, and all of the boys were better at different things. And so they all got prizes because they were all better at things. And so, they all worked, they all tried, and they all wanted something. And if you're to take a look at the things that they competed in, the running, the shooting, the other shooting, the climbing, the swimming, all of these things, a lot of these things are what you see in the Olympics, which actually came around after this. Or the modern Olympics came around after this, but, the ancient Olympics were before. And most of the things in that, and most of the things in the Olympics, are actually military type exercises. It's like, okay, run and attack, or shoot, and so here we, just like I mentioned back in the other chapter where he started the boys in training. And once again, he's realizing that his gunpowder is going to run out at some point. So this is something that he has to work on and worry about because, well, he's good for food and he's good for supplies and he can get himself into late Stone Age technology here. He has enough stuff to bootstrap himself well into late Stone Age technology. He still doesn't have a source of metal. He still doesn't have a source of gunpowder. So these are things that he's going to have to work on. The family's going to have to work on. They have food, they have salt, they have everything they need to like survive, but they don't have enough stuff to maintain and rebuild a lot of the stuff that they have. So if they bend a gun, the gun is gone. If they lose a knife, the knife is gone. If something rusts irreparably, it is gone. And they don't have ways to rebuild them. So this is something that, he's still thinking about. Even though he's built all of these wonderful things, he's built like 4 buildings now. He has like 4 or 5 buildings. It's like, okay, I can go and I can live in this building happily. I have food, I have shelter, I have water. I have everything I need. But he's still looking for something more. So we'll see how this goes, because eventually he's going to run out of planks and sailcloth from the ship.